Good evening. Thank you for coming on this cold evening to the Finance and General Purposes Committee meeting. Pardon?
Good evening.
I did say good evening.
Yes. Echoing.
I'm sorry.
Echoing your
Sorry.
sentiment,
You'll
Mr.
be-
Chair.
Okay. So item 1 on the agenda is to receive any apologies for absence, and we have an apology from Stephen White, and that will be recorded in the minutes. Any declarations of interest?
As part of the precept is the clerk's payment, then yes, I have a pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Justine. Okay, so that does that part of the meeting. Comments and observations from the public relevant to the agenda items, gentlemen? Thank you very much. As you'll be only two gentlemen here, we will proceed with the meeting. Item 3 is to approve the minutes of the previous committee meeting held on the 21st of October. You've all seen the minutes. Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Fine?
Yeah.
Good. Proposed? Willie? Seconded?
Yeah.
Graham? You're not big. You can't.
Already.
You can't.
Well, no, that's why I was.
You can't because you weren't
I
here.
wasn't here. That's why I was calmed down.
Yes. That's why I looked to say you weren't going to.
Yes.
This is the pre-precept.
That's correct. So, item 4 on the agenda is the precept for 2015-2016. Okay, so I did a little list which I circulated to you all of the items that the parish council has by way of expenditure, which are it interested me when I was doing it, and I hope it sort of gave you an insight as well, that as you know, that Hilton has, when you look at that, £19,620 worth of overhead, which is sort of it, you know. So you've got the grass cutting of 6,900, and maintenance, and the cricket pitch of 800, the clerk salary of 5 and a bit, and insurance of 1,300, the street lights and maintenance of 1,300, the utilities that we pay, the audit fee we have to pay, hall rental, play park maintenance, and when you add all that up, then you have to take into consideration the maintenance that the parish council has to do on the trees, the ditches and the ponds. And when you get an unexpected expense, I guess, if you could call it, from where we were last year when we agreed to repair the car park outside, there's nothing in the amount of money that comes in by way of precept that actually allows for that. And over the years, the parish council has seen its reserves go down, which is quite right, because it had quite a bit of money in reserves, and it was having, I think, if I recall correctly, there were comments coming into the parish council from auditors that the reserves were too high, they had to come down, and money was spent on various projects around the village. But we got to a point now where, with the committed expenditure that was left over from last year, being the crossing and the removal of the light on the edge of the house down the road there, that we can't there isn't really too much scope to eat into reserves any further. You've got, and if there were to come any other unexpected expenditure, it might be a bit difficult to keep dipping into reserves to match it. For instance, there's been, as far as I know, there's been no provision for repairs on the pavilion for some time. There's work being done around the village this year that wasn't anticipated. I think the clearing of the wear and Reed's Ditch, one side of Reed's Ditch, there's work to be done still. There's work to be done on a thicket down the way there. Yeah. There's work to be done. I will imagine it will come up again, but there's a thicket down the side of Potton Road, which had work done previously. So there's work, and other ditches, and that where perhaps the parish council aren't necessarily responsible for the ownership, but with budgets cut elsewhere, there's almost a moral and social responsibility on the parish council to attend to some of the other assets of the village, or areas of the village. The parish council does own the 27 acres of green.
Yeah, I thought
It is something like
yeah,
that.
between 24 and 27, something like that.
And what I think, since we've since we were elected in, we've had a chance to look at where the expenditure is in the village and address we need to look at making provisions for and addressing other areas that need to be maintained so that everybody can enjoy Hilton and hopefully it can be safe. Okay, so we know that the trees this year, we've done great steps on getting a competitive tendering situation whereby 3 contractors came around and looked at the work that was up for grabs, and we got a good quote which only addressed
The A's and B's.
the A's and B's, yes, and not the C's. And I understand there is a D list of work that
Yeah.
could potentially, would come up as the work progressed. There's a lot of trees,
Yeah.
there's a lot of ditches. The car park will need to be repaired again at some time in the future. Or maintained. So we need to look at setting a precept that wouldn't be a burden on people in terms of any increase that we'd be looking for, but perhaps a precept that would allow provision for work that is there to be done, but isn't necessarily able to be addressed. Yeah.
Well, it's all essential work as well. It becomes essential in time, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think that's the key point, Willie, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
what we've done historically, certainly during our tenure, feels reactive rather than preventative. I think, if I'm reading this correctly, almost the principle is there's things and areas that we could address, and if we prevented some of this further decay and or damage or erosion or whatever technical term you want to use, you're actually going to save the parish council more money and disruption and safety angle as well in the future, because you don't let it get that bad. And I don't think that's been covered off, certainly not in our tenure.
No.
I couldn't speak for previous councils how much they were able to address that.
Well, I suppose it's been intended to as an emergency in the past, in the past. So if these things are built in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to
Yes, if you can actually
the
provide
annual budget.
to
I
work.
think it's about that term I think I was struggling for. There was something like asset management, isn't it? We do
Yeah.
have these wonderful assets, and at the moment we are, keeping them going as best we can. But really, there's scope there to perhaps manage them rather than just.
Yeah, expenditure, sadly, the expenditure is weighted towards the asset, isn't it? Whereas it would be good to be able to, in the first place, react to other requests for work. The play park will need to have more maintenance on it with regards to the wooden surroundings over the years to come. We did a repair on it this last year, and I would guess at some point there will be a question that the mats will need to be replaced
Yeah.
if they continue to get amplified. What do you reckon on that, Graham?
Well, play park always comes in a bit of action,
Yeah.
so I don't think we ought to hone that too early.
No, but there's not the money to say, right, let's
No, but the actual play park, if we're going to discuss that, is in quite good nick.
Mm.
So I don't think that's going to be a big expenditure.
And that's why there isn't much of
But
that.
you always have to have the insurance
Yes.
look at it, and there will be money certainly. But
And the insurance
It's gonna
cost
be a
has
big
come
one.
down
Yeah, that's
with following Gail's work.
Yes.
credit.
Then we were able to talk to Gail and Co afterwards, weren't we?
I've
And
got a 3-year deal.
we did a good 3-year deal, which brought, I think, £700 or so in terms of savings. And then, of course, there isn't income. I think the parish council's lost about £1,100 of income stream from the tax credit that it used to get.
That's what you made me think of that when you were talking about when the parish was encouraged to, use its reserves. And it was a different time, 5 or 6% interest rates,
Yeah.
sitting on decent money in a bank. There was an income stream there.
There was £500 or £600 a year in interest,
And
and
that, obviously, as that went away, that wasn't reflected in any kind of
No.
precept provision.
no. What else have we looked to save money on? We struck out a deal on the insurance. We're 2 years into the 3-year
Yeah.
John Carter deal,
Yeah.
which was negotiated at that time. We have looked at considerable savings on the tree maintenance this year. That's allowed more work to be done. No, it's allowed work to be done, but at a cheaper price to keep it within what was provisioned or allowed for that. I am conscious that should a branch fall off a tree and land on the cricket pavilion roof.
Yeah, I suppose you think insurance may cover that, though.
Might do.
To look at small print. But I think there's definitely a culture of trying to get a better rate where we can for activities or services, and I don't think that's going to go away regardless of what precept we're able to secure. I think that kind of mindset is there across the council. So I think it'll all help whether we can reduce on the outgoings. Then maybe next year we ask for less of a precept, we'll be able to manage expenditure better. But
I'll be also able to comment on the crossing. Not this meeting.
I can't say because that was it's not agendaed. It's not.
No, but we do now have the bill, don't we? So that's not going to get forgotten.
no. In fact, we've been chasing them up for it, haven't we?
Yes, so it's all coming into it, and there's other bills as well. So
That's
there's things on here
that
that
committed spend, isn't it?
It was a committed expenditure.
Yeah.
And what didn't happen with that expenditure was it wasn't precepted. It was agreed that it would be taken from reserves, where I think that there are other villages that I'm aware of who would have gone to the popular and asked for a precepted increase for maybe over 3 years to cover that cost.
if all that came from reserves, there wouldn't be much left with it.
No.
You have to sort of keep topping up.
You have to make sure that you have an amount of reserves.
Yeah.
And you can't be swimming in funds, but you have to look at what your expenditure is and budget accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And we have tried to do that, I believe.
Yeah.
But these figures here, although the new precept proposed is expensive, there's no reckless spend, is there? There's not a change in policy, I would suggest.
Absolutely not. No, what it's looked at is trying to look at those other areas where we know there is work that needs to be attended to.
Yes.
And hasn't gone and said, let's do it all in year one, in 1 year.
No.
It's to provide for and to allow maintenance of ditches, ponds, trees
Preventative maintenance.
around the around the whole village,
Yeah.
which I think is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can't see anything on that list that you.
Well, some of them are sort of token figures that you wouldn't know how to
Well,
no,
it might be
but they're just
invested, yeah.
allowances, aren't they?
Yeah.
So,
Yes. There's obviously we put in a figure of £250 per car park
yeah.
maintenance,
Which is
which
about third
it
of
was
what it was.
£750 the last time.
But it got quite bad by then, so
Yeah,
getting back to that theme of
and if it lasts 4 years,
4 weeks.
and
Bloody well
it's
spent.
£1,000, the price of that deal might have gone up because contractor had his equipment in the village, didn't he?
Yeah.
At that
Well,
time.
Yeah.
more expensive
It was
than
more
virtual,
expensive,
that's
yeah.
true.
But again, if we don't allow it to get to the stage when the ruts were so deep and the holes were so
Yeah.
expansive, wide, then you might only need to spend a couple of hundred to bring it back up to a decent order to run for again another couple of years.
Absolutely, and we know that there will be a need for it to be maintained, because it's a well-used car park.
Yeah, and unless there's a policy shift from the hall, we won't be able to look on them for any contribution to that. I don't mean that as a criticism, it's a statement of fact. So I think part of what this is doing as well is removing some of those old either assumptions or problems will go away or it's okay, it's fine, or actually a bit of the old known unknowns, isn't it? People knew that there was problems.
Well,
and
I
issues
think
there.
things that have to be faced up to, really.
Yeah, and they just never got around to doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, because looking at that thicket in Sparrow Way, for instance, there's a tree down in the middle.
Yeah, I think there's even a path there, isn't there?
And the path that needs to be
Keep you
Covered,
overcovered.
exactly.
Yes.
Because it's not a popular thoroughfare, shall we say. It's, you kind of put it on your C or D list, and it's,
It needs to be attended.
suddenly to put it right is a bigger hole than we want it to be, potentially. And I know that's a guesswork.
No, that was the price that
Oh,
was
that's fine.
for the first year of maintenance.
Okay.
So,
Mm.
what are your thoughts and comments?
Well, are we going to announce the figure tonight?
I don't know.
I think so.
We were going to report it to the parish council.
Yes, but
on
I think
Monday.
it needs to be discussed what the figure is. I
Yeah.
think the figure that you got here of 27,000, I think needs to be
That's not an
mentioned.
increase then.
No, that's the figure that needs to
It's a
be,
forecast of increase.
is the proposal,
Yes.
and that has to be out there
Yeah.
because we have to present that to the,
Parish
Parish
council
council.
on Monday.
and we have to recommend it or be happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
That'll be the call for after the discussion, won't it?
I think it's a big increase, but I think it's I wouldn't say it's fair. But I think you understand where it's come from, but it's going to be hard. We need to explain how it's built up, and I don't think all these little figures are worth it. I'm just wondering whether we can do some kind of pie chart explaining where it all goes, because it's very hard for people to understand how the money is spent.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a sort of common recurring thing, isn't it? When you get your bills, even your tax bill now, you have some kind of build
Well, I
up.
had a pie chart.
You have a build up as to where it's all gone, which I think is indicative and it's useful because it lets people know where the big spends are.
Yeah.
I don't
I think
think
visuals
people-
don't hurt. I think you're right. I think if you saw that represented as a chart where
Yeah.
description of pie works quite nicely,
Yeah.
and you suddenly saw that probably 2/3 of it comfortably sits under maybe 3 or 4
Big items.
items.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might focus people's mind that there's not a lot left then
Yeah.
over.
Yeah,
But
I think
things will maintain.
I mean, the increase is already, it's a high increase, but I think you've got to concentrate on what you get for that money and the fact that we haven't got the other incomes. So the income shortages
Yeah.
that we get
That's a good
are
point.
being proposed by an increase in precept.
Yeah.
But I do think it's very important that we explain percentage-wise where it all goes, because there are certain things on here that people won't appreciate.
Yeah.
I mean, street lighting is always something you assume that the county council does. I mean, people know, but not I'm just looking at figures here, that and insurance accounts for 10% of what people pay.
Yeah, sadly.
So, I mean, there's some big chunks in there that people won't be aware of. And although last year we had one comment saying, please hold the increase because of people on fixed incomes. Personally, I think, well, I received more comments about the fact that it hadn't gone up very much, and that money wasn't being spent in places where it should be being spent.
Well, that's
So you know, I had a 3-to-1
Yeah.
comment in terms of people thinking that more should be spent.
Mm.
So that's why I feel comfortable about this, but we're going to have to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've done my little breakdown.
Well, you've done a breakdown, but there's lots of numbers there that people
Yeah.
won't remember that.
Yeah.
If we could break it down into, say, 5 or 6 chunks, then I
because
think
the
that's going
biggest
to
is
be...
always going to be looking after
The asset.
the green
The asset.
trees and ditches. It's always going to be the biggest chunk, isn't it?
There are so many trees around the village, yeah. And there's all the waterways.
Yeah.
And obviously people, quite rightly, want to make sure that those waterways are maintained and kept clear from the risk of flooding. Yeah, there is.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, getting
You
4 or
can break
5
it
meaty
down.
chunks.
Yes.
People
It needs
get
to
that.
be, it needs to
Asset
be presented.
management
If you
is
just,
X.
yeah, if you just, just mention a figure, people...
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
It's
I agree with
it's
that.
very hard to
That's
understand.
a good idea.
Reflect
Good
with,
idea.
with reduction that we have had in incomes.
Mhm.
Keep it to the
11
main
million
themes,
pounds.
and of course you
Yeah.
can always expand on that if need be.
Because very few, not much of this would actually show, would it? There's no capital expenditure, there's nothing sort of, apart from the crossing, there's nothing that you could say, well, in that year we built that. It's all just maintenance, isn't it?
Mm.
From what I can see.
Yeah, no, there isn't anything.
So even with that amount of money,
Mm.
you move things forward, but not dramatically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
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 So provided we present it well, I'm happy to go for that.
And it's less than 50p per popular per month.
In terms of what?
The
The
electorate was 816.
Yeah, the increase is all well, I prefer to look at it as how much it actually costs. Because the increase is, you know, it's still...
But it also, people like it split down to bite size.
True,
Figure something that they can relate to.
Yeah, but an increase is all well and good, and I prefer it to be sort of, well, actually it's going to cost you, what it costs us on average, X pounds a month, X pounds a week. You know, and do you get good value for that? Because no one will know whether they're getting good value for the increase, but they'll know if they're getting good value for the total spend, because that's what people spend, isn't it? They have to spend the actual rather than the increase. So if we're going to go for this is how much it's costing per head, by all means you can put in the increase, but I prefer to have it.
I think it's good to have it reserved if somebody asks the question, well, what does that mean to my pocket?
Mm.
Then, yeah, regardless of if it's good value for money or not, you can say, well, actually, to you, sir, madam, it's going to be this.
But also that is only the average, isn't it?
That's only the average,
Depending
yes.
on your house spend,
Yeah.
you've got a
Yes.
huge difference on what you actually pay.
Yeah.
So I'd see
Oh,
it
yeah.
very much, I think you're right, as a back pocket piece of information with some caveats.
Yeah.
But the key is actually to maintain that much acreage, with that diversity of assets to manage. The fact that there's been a historical, as you say, I mean, I don't think we've been particularly as a village, as a parish, precept hungry. So I think we've put in reasonable bids on around the rate of inflation, typically, we did last year. I'm sure we've done that before in the past. And the fact that the income is coming down, so we haven't got that stream anymore, and the fact that we are trying as a council to where we can reduce any of the costs and get the value for money, to come back to your point, I think this is a reasonable figure to ask for. It will put us in some good shape and allow us to prevent a lot of further additional costs in subsequent years. I think that would be the aim. So based on that, I'm
And I think
happy with
also
that.
the fact that it allows work to be done in all areas of the village.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
you
the
mentioned about the large amount that goes on the assets, which it does, but I think it would be good to be able to have funds available to do work in other areas.
Yeah. Well, you've got a sparrow, haven't you?
Yeah.
and the way it was good.
I
In fact, the way
It
it
looks really good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's questionable as to whose land it was, but even so,
Yeah,
it's just
at least the
about
job's done.
social responsibility,
Yeah.
isn't it? If everyone drives past it and it looks immense, and that doesn't, so,
Yeah.
as you say,
And there's another pond up that way as well, isn't there?
there is indeed.
You might need to have some work done
There's a
there.
bit of a ditch at the far end as well, isn't there?
Yes,
Full of
there's
leaves.
a ditch down Tide Lane. Is it Tide Lane? Yes, that, again, is questionable as to who
That's always been an issue, so
owns it, but if we could actually
start some work on that.
get some work done on it.
Volunteer push,
Yeah.
perhaps. Volunteer push, perhaps.
Well, there's some good hurdles to overcome for all that, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are areas and pockets that need some attention in the village. I just thought of the village garden, of course.
Indeed.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I think that may, I don't know, it's dark at the moment, when I'm going in, so I don't see what condition it's in. It's okay at the moment.
Gets weeded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So will you break this down into?
Sorry, well, I think what Graham's suggesting is that it's banded up rather than rolled up into some general theme.
Yes.
I can bend it.
So then
Yeah.
on a pie chart,
I
you may only
haven't got a
get...
A pie chart, you're
Thinking about the old Frugal Pursuit analogy,
Yeah.
it might only be 6 wedges in
Yeah.
totality. Each one of those
Well, I
wedges
think that, I
with a
think that's,
percentage in it.
yeah.
I think that's a very neat way
Yeah.
of just an impactful way of showing
Okay.
people actually
I
that's
shall
where
take
the
that.
lion's share is.
Mm.
Typo in there. There was a typo in there that I didn't.
There's several typos.
Excel doesn't.
Maintenance, admin.
Yeah. Right. Allow.
We
Yes.
knew what you meant there.
Yes.
Um,
You could take that from the wrong way, couldn't you? And
So shall I do that then?
It is come to town.
I think that would be very
If you have the time, that would be very.
I shall make the time.
Thank you. Because you've got the figures. That's
Yeah,
what we're
but-
going to. If
Well,
you're in
if you're-
agreement.
Well, do I need to propose it, or do I need to propose it?
Propose that,
Okay.
some for precept.
The 27070
Yes.
Yeah.
to be presented
To the parish council
As a
meeting
recommendation.
on Monday
Yes.
That's a
to
pie
be
chart.
discussed. And then, when are we going to get the precept in?
19th of December.
Okay.
So just opposed.
Yeah.
I'll have a second it.
All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. Any
No.
other comments or thoughts?
Not on that issue, no.
That's all that is. That's all there is.
Okay.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Why do we get a pie chart or something? We've got a screen over there.
Yeah, you could put
I think it'd be really good to
It
do
might be something, otherwise you can't.
No, no, no. It's dull, isn't it?
It is.
It's done.
It needs to be brightened up.
especially
Yeah.
when you see this.
Okay.
Okay, if you've got the time.
I shall make time down.
Okay. On that basis, that's the business of the meeting. Thank you very much. It's a closed meeting. Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Signed, Jeff.